welcome, Daniel. We'll get started. We're 3 minutes behind schedule here. I was supposed to be in the pub tonight. I had a colleague that I've worked with for 6 years. I realized I double booked, and I'm like, I can't let this colleague down 'cause I've worked for him for 6 years. But I didn't want to let Daniel down as well. Been involved with Daniel for a little while now, 3 or 4 years maybe, Daniel, and it's an evolved relationship over the time. But I think it's the first time we've kind of caught up in the last probably 6 months or so. Daniel's got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to so many different aspects to running an MSP, a technology business. And he has obviously this business, the MSP finance team. So I thought it would be good to get him on to the audience here, IT Rockstars, and just some of the ways that you can looking at things like your budget and your forecast. And I'm going to be asking really dumb questions because I have absolutely nothing. I have no idea about how to budget or forecast. So I'm coming at it from that angle, asking those types of questions. You guys, if you've got, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of this, the granular questions as well. But I almost want to start with a high level, Daniel. So it's from why do I need to budget? The obvious thing is, okay, so that you don't run out of money, Scott, you've got cash flow. But is there more to it than that?
Absolutely. And on the forthcoming slides, we'll hopefully explore just how complicated, but also how simple it can be. And if you're okay with me to start us off.
Sure.
So, there we are. Brilliant. This is one for you, Scott, to answer straight away, and hopefully our audience can put something in the chat as well. But basically, I'd just like to get a sense for who's in the room virtually and what levels we're communicating to and catering for. If you were to judge yourself on financial literacy, would you put yourself in 1, 2, or 3?
Definitely a 1, Daniel, for me.
Definitely a 1. Okay, we've got another one.
I'm looking at my costs, and I'm looking at how much money's coming in every month. That's about it.
Okay. And we've got a 2 as well, I can see. Okay, in that case, I think I've got the slides just right then.
Yeah.
If we had the next Chancellor of the Exchequer in the room, then this might be slightly at the wrong level. So that's good. That's good news. Skipped over 2 slides there. Adam and I share the presenting responsibilities for MSP Finance Team, Adam being my business partner, and you'll see a picture of him shortly if you've not had the pleasure as yet. Whenever Adam does a presentation, he basically has some warm-up exercises, financial. I won't spoil all of them if you've not seen an Adam presentation, but one of the things he does is he says, you can either have £20 million today, or you can have a penny every day for the next month that doubles every day. And it's who wants what? Yeah. And the answer is actually, or the best answer, the highest amount of money is actually the second one. Absolutely, yeah. So he's right on it, yeah.
I learned that literally 3 years ago. I'm like 45 now. I wish I'd learned it when I was 18.
Yeah, because it would have been...
It's one of those things they just don't teach.
All that time. Yeah, absolutely. But then the reason I'm not using that today in this presentation is because A, that's Adam's, and B, the last time we did it, we actually had a member of the audience come up and pointing holes in the equation and saying, hold on, that first day the penny didn't double. So let's actually just clarify what's happening here with the calculation. But so I've opted for just a few quotes to get us in the financial mindset. You probably have been reading them as I've been talking, so I won't necessarily read them out. The last one on the page, though, is one of my favorites in terms of this process. It is a lot of the time business planning is just done up here in the old noggin, and you can do an awful lot with your brain, but you can't always remember every thread in the bundle. And that's really what we're doing here. We're capturing numbers that we might otherwise misremember, misinterpret, forget about, over-exaggerate, underestimate, etc. So that's the fundamental of what we're doing. And as Eleanor Roosevelt, I believe, the US Roosevelt, basically it takes as much energy to think about it up here over and over again as it does to actually sit down and put it down on paper. That's the purpose of obviously today's session. Finally, the third one on this screen, I remember at a Synaxon event probably about 4 years ago, they had speaker Gerald Ratner. Now, anyone in the UK would certainly know him. Maybe not so much in the US, although there was a US business. He had a chain of jewelers, and spectacularly, the business imploded. Not necessarily, but linked to a quote that he said that everything he sold was tat, or something along those lines. And I thought this was his quote because he delivered this in his. But apparently, it wasn't. It was a gentleman a few years ago. But Gerald Ratner stood up on stage recounting all his ups and downs. And he said, yeah, if you owe the bank $100, he said £100, that's your problem. If you owe the bank 100 million, that's the bank's problem. And basically said you'd be surprised how easy it is to get a meeting with a bank manager when you earn that amount of money. And it's a really interesting story. So if you can check out his story afterwards. So that's warm up out the way. Just a little bit about Adam and I. We are both former MSP owners. My exit was 9 years ago this year. Adam 3 years ago this year, I think. And so we've lived and breathed the process of starting a business. Neither of us were or are accountants. I'm a salesperson by trade, and Adam was a technician and engineer by trade. And most MSPs are not accountants or salespeople. The majority are engineers and certainly don't have a financial background. So there's a big learning curve that most MSP owners go through. You'd often think about who would have that sort of support and knowledge to help me. Most people would think they're accountants. We almost have them up on a pedestal, and actually accountants know just about as much about business as any other business person you may be surprised to hear. And the service the accountants typically are providing most businesses is one of compliance. You have to submit your accounts annually. You have to do tax returns. I believe that's the case in the US and the UK. And they're not necessarily doing that in a timely fashion, because you don't have to submit your accounts in the UK until nine months after the year end. By the time your accountant serves you up a profit and loss and a balance sheet, that could be like 20 months since it happened. If you spot a problem, you're too far away from it to do anything about it.
Yep.
So that means that really what we're saying here, our whole mantra in terms of the cornerstone of our education for the MSP marketplace, is that you must have monthly numbers, and you've got to make them as accurate as you can for them to have more meaning. And once you've got that data, there's an awful lot that you can do with it. So yeah, just a little bit about Adam and I. We have a number of services in terms of how we deliver that support, from bookkeeping coaching through to a done-for-you management account service, FD as a service, and MSPs can consult and do consult with Adam and I on a direct one-to-one basis as well. Today, though, what we're talking about is budgeting, forecasting, pipeline. As I've already said, you can't keep it all in your head. There's just far too many elements in an MSP business, in most businesses, to keep a track of. A lot of people burn, the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, a lot of energy having it all up there. It's actually therapeutic to put it down on paper as well, because it gets it out of your head and you don't have to think about it. So that's the first reason why we should budget. The second reason is, and you might have already been doing this, but you've got to think ahead, because you're going to put a number. The first number you put in every part of the budget is a future number. And the further ahead that you plan, in theory, the harder it becomes to get that number correct. And really what we're saying here is, if you think about it in your head and you're thinking about it in terms of the next week, the next month, the next quarter, the next year even, that isn't far enough ahead, because most businesses develop over time, over a number of years, some over a number of decades. And ultimately, the third point, which is about setting realistic targets, I can't remember who it was that said this, but someone said, you are definitely exiting your business. Everyone will be. And it's either going to be a timed sale, or it's going to be a life-limiting reason that you're going to exit your business. Either way, you want to be planning ahead to what your business is worth, what role you're going to have in your business, and that all requires financial planning. Finally, if we don't have a budget, how do we know we're doing well? Oh, I was double this month than I was last month. Hope that's good news. But is that sustainable? And therefore, the next month, if you're only 20% up, have you done a bad thing? Are you going to give yourself the recognition that your business is performing well and growing? And having that budget to go back to that you've set out that delivers over time the end result that you want, so there's a significant increase in satisfaction, and it's a more sustainable pace that you can maintain. What are we talking about when we talk about a budget? My definition of this is it's a profit and loss wish list. This is what I want my profit and loss to look like when I have my management accounts in month 12, in month 24, in month 36. This is what I want the performance of the business to be. At this stage, budgeting, it isn't a forecast. We're not saying we're definitely going to achieve that, but we're giving ourselves a target to aim for. And crucially, month by month, we're breaking down the process of growing our business into bite-sized chunks. Again, makes it more sustainable. We're not basing this on business that we already know about. That is a pipeline. And in some ways, when we put together our budget, it should be a bit scary. We should not know exactly how we're going to achieve the number. Of course, we're going to have some modeling that goes into it, and we're going to make some assumptions about how much we're going to spend on sales and marketing and what lead generation that's going to give us, and then how many customers we're going to close and over what time frame. So there has to be some realistic components that go into that, but we don't know who our 10th customer is going to be. We don't know who's going to deliver that 10% growth in month 27, but that's a problem for month 20 onwards. So again, we're breaking down into bite-sized chunks how we go from our starting point to our ending point. Any questions before I move on?
I've got a question, Daniel. So the forecast, is that almost like you setting your goals? Where you want to get the business to?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we're doing with the budget.
All right. Okay.
I'll come on to forecast and what most people commonly refer to a forecast as.
Okay.
But yeah, effectively we are, and often, by the way, this is a process that Adam and I go through as part of our one-to-one business planning exercise, obviously condensed down for the purposes of today. But ultimately, if we were to list out exactly where we wanted to be in 3 years, so I want to have a business double the size, triple the size. That means that I'm going to be selling this amount of Microsoft 365 products. I'm going to be selling this amount of managed services. I'm going to be selling this amount of business continuity, etc. And if we put down in month 36 what we want to be doing, then effectively, if we were to draw a straight line back to our starting point, i.e., what did we do last month? And let's assume we do the same next month, then that basically sets us our target for the 36-month duration, rather than saying, I want to be at this size of business and to expect that it's going to go up in chunks. Now, some people will model in, you'll have heard the phrase hockey stick, where actually, yeah, we're going to do nothing for 12 months and then it's going to rocket up. What are you doing in those 12 months that's going to mean it's going to rocket up? And yeah, this is approaches to how you get stuck into the modeling activity itself. But yeah, effectively we're saying this is what my ultimate target is, and therefore this is computationally all of the mini targets that I've got for every month.
All right. And based on your experience, Mal, hopefully this will be my last question, but as an MSP grows, so they maybe got like a 5% growth, or I don't know what the percentage is on an average. Does that growth increase over time? Okay, next month I'm going to put on an extra, I don't know, 2%. But by month 36, we're going to be adding in a larger percentage of growth. Does it work like that?
Yeah, I'd say it probably works the other way around, actually.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, in the early days, if you only did £1,000 last month and you do £2,000 this month. Yeah, it's
Double,
brilliant.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But when you're doing 1 million a month,
Double that.
I don't think you're going to expect to do 2 million a month. Yeah. Again, it depends what the increments and the value of your increments are. If you did £1,000 selling 1 day of consultancy time, and the next month you sold 2 days of consultancy time, yeah, that's okay. But how many MSPs sell £1 million things, and therefore the likelihood of them finding and selling one extra £1 million thing is unlikely. Generally, the growth rate will reduce as a, not necessarily exactly in a straight line format, but if you imagine the typical process of spending a certain amount of money on sales and marketing effort, there will be step changes where the owner stops doing selling, and
Yeah.
and is the team ready to emulate or improve on what the owner was doing, and also how much risk do the shareholders want to take in growing, because growing is not risk free and it's not cost free perhaps. And what I see with a lot of MSPs actually is you get to a point of comfort, and then how much do you want to risk every year? I can earn £250,000 a year now out of this business. Do I really want to burn
Yeah.
a hundred of that on sales and marketing effort? Maybe I don't. So maybe you get to a point of relative comfort. And I've got a great analogy for that, which if we've got time, I'll remind me later, and I'll tell
Okay.
you about my growth spurts comfort analogy. But yeah, to answer your question, I would say the opposite.
Okay. I told you it was full of stupid questions.
Not at all. You put yourself in the number one category,
Yeah.
and hopefully you'll finish today as a number two.
A 1.1.
At 1.1, I'd settle for that. I'd settle for that. Where to start then? As I said earlier, if we're going to use our first month based on where we are today, or where we think we'll be next month, we've got to have our chart of accounts in good order and available to us in a timely fashion. Now, I'm saying chart of accounts. Anyone not know what chart of accounts is? I'm going to assume not.
Yeah, me.
Yeah. Okay. Chart of accounts is effectively a list of all of the components of your profit and loss, well, and in fact, your balance sheet as well. And for the benefit of this slide, I'm going to focus on what we call above the line, so revenue and direct cost of sales. Revenue, and I've just described a moment ago a way that we might break that down. So what we don't want to see in a chart of accounts is one line that says sales, which is what the default for most accounting products is. So we don't want to see sales and £10,000. We want to see, and I would argue, at least 4 categories of income. The first, as per the screen, is to have recurring service as a category. Now that would be your per user, per month, per device, per month, whatever your increments are, but your core managed service. And we want to see that because that's important for valuation tracking. Again, we may not have time to cover that today, but we want to see that also because we know that's probably what we're going to do next month. And that's probably what we're going to do the month after that as well, subject to the notice period that our customer agreements have. But that's a key number that we want to track. We also then want to see what our one-time services are. So this is our project work, our day rate activities, our hourly rate, anything that's excluded perhaps from our core service. Again, we want to see that because the majority of the time that's going to be resourced from our internal staff, or we're going to have an arrangement if we're outsourcing, but it's a key margin contributor. So I don't want that service number skewed or diluted by the fact that I sold 10 laptops this month, because I'm not likely to see that 10 laptops again the next month. There I'm talking about one-time resold items, laptops, PCs, networking equipment. I also, though, want to see what my recurring resold is, by which I'm talking about my Microsoft 365 licensing, my security product stack, anything that's recurring that effectively I'm buying in and reselling. Again, each one of those revenue lines will have a different feed into a number of valuation methods. So it's important we recognize them when we split them out, because we'll be able to report on them and show historically how we've grown. And fast forward to next month, we're now reviewing the performance of this month, and we're looking down our revenue, and I'm really not interested, aside from the one-time margin contribution, I'm really not interested that I've sold 10 laptops. I'd be much more interested in seeing that my recurring core service has increased, because that's the one that is going to repeat again the next month and the month after that and indefinitely. So that's why I'd have those 4 categories of income, and that's what I'm going to model when I come to build my budget. And I know I'm starting on £10,000 a month of recurring service, and I know I want to get to £40,000 a month of recurring service. So therefore, my £30,000 difference, I'm going to work out how I'm going to spread that over the months in terms of where I'm going to acquire it. And it might be that if I've got no pipeline, no marketing system at the moment, perhaps I'm not going to just go up a little bit every month, because there's no reason why I would expect that. But maybe I now start spending money on sales and marketing, and I then start seeing my increase from, say, month 12, for example, and then maybe I step up to my 30 grand over the next 24 months. That's an example of the sort of modeling work that we're doing, and crucially why this process is so important, because from that we can start to say, what are we going to spend our money on, and what should our expectation be from spending that money? And so the business plan effectively builds from the numbers out. The final part just on this chart of accounts, again, the top part of it is, for every revenue, we want to see what the cost is as well. And we want to do that because we want to be calculating and tracking our gross margin, and we want to be seeing that we're in a healthy gross margin position. And again, there's a lot more in chart of accounts that I could cover, but aware of our time limitation today. But basically, if I've got £10,000 of one-time laptop sales and I've got a cost of £8,000, that's okay, it makes sense. If I've got a cost of £12,000 in my one-time product and I've got an income of 10, I know there's a problem there. So hopefully I'm not discovering that when I'm looking at my management accounts, but there's insight there that can be gained. And perhaps we see that, oh yeah, our margin is less than what we expected it to be. And what's the reason for that? Well, it's because the price on the stock moved after we quoted the customer. What can we do next month to improve that? Or what going forward should we be doing with our customers? Should we be getting them to forward order with us so that we can buy proactively for them? For example, that was a key issue as we entered the pandemic process, just a limited supply of stock, and lots of MSPs were thinking on their feet about how they got around that. So yeah, so that's why it's important for us to be tracking those numbers, and that they mirror as well, so that I'm not getting confused that, oh no, my costs are making less money this month, but I want to understand why and how that's being arrived at, and I want to plan it so that I can see where my margin contribution is coming from. So that's where to start. How to start. This is not a particularly good image on this slide, because a moment ago I said we don't want to see one sales line, but when I Googled profit and loss picture, this is the one that came up. I only chose it because it had an IT services connotation to it, which is the keen eyes amongst you may spot. But basically, how do we start? Your audience may be using a variety of different accounting products right now. Xero, QuickBooks, may even have some Sage out there. Whatever the product is, you should be able to produce a P&L and export it. And that effectively will give you your starting point. Then you effectively build a model out, and of course MSP finance team, the customers get the benefit of some templates that Adam and I already have developed to aid in this process. But in lieu of having those, you can effectively create your month one from your current P&L, and then do 36 months along the top, and then start to populate the numbers. If you want to make the model interactive, then you can effectively automate the cost of sales part based on the revenue. For example, if we're making 20% on our laptop sales, if we put £1,000 in one-time product sales, we want to automatically put £800 in our corresponding cost of sales. So basically, we can play around with our budgeting model just by adjusting the revenue, and the cost of sales will automate. A key part, though, of calculating your cost of sales is you must include your direct delivery labour. A good budget would have a separate tab or feed into the budget itself that lists out all of the different roles that you're going to have, and over time, what roles you're going to recruit for. And that does two things. It tells you when you need to have the next third liner, the next second liner, the next first liner. So you can now start to work back from that in terms of your recruitment process. It also, though, gives us an ability, again, as we're modeling, if we're going to sell £100,000 worth of managed services, how much labour do we need to deliver that? There's no point us forecasting in our budget 100 grand and underestimating the labour required to deliver that, because otherwise it's going to show that we're going to be making way more money than we actually will. And we need to predict or budget for how much money we're going to make, because that money is going to fund all of our overheads. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, one of the key costs for most MSPs is the people. So having that budget correct, and also adding in the extra roles that you don't have when you're smaller compared to when you're larger. Do you have a dedicated dispatcher? Do you have a service desk manager? Do you have a team leader? Do you have a senior leadership team? And all of these roles, as you grow, will be required. And it's crucially important to make sure we're allowing for all of those required people, because that kind of sets our budget for what we can spend on growth. Can we afford to spend £100,000 on sales and marketing this year? If we've not got either, we're not going to generate it from our trading position, and/or we don't have the money available via any other method, then no, we can't spend 100,000. So we need to create our budget. And again, this is a modelling process. So how much can we afford to spend? What results will we get? And there's a natural link between the two. It's more about the journey than it is the destination when it comes to this. Rushing through it and not thinking about the numbers you're putting in is not a good approach. You must give yourself enough time to properly consider meaningful numbers that are going into this.
Okay. We've got a question, Daniel,
Okay.
from James. Would we record our costs to acquire the customer in this section? He's saying, apologies if not explained my question properly, but how much has been invested time-wise, marketing material, sales, person, commission, etc.? If we don't record it in this section, should we place it under our marketing bucket?
Yeah, good question. Sales and marketing is an overhead, so it doesn't go into cost of sales, i.e. you've got to spend the money in advance. It's not directly linked to delivering that revenue. Obviously, without it, you can't get the revenue. But yes, it wouldn't go in cost of sales. It would go in sales and marketing. And sales and marketing would include whoever's involved in the process, what their commissions are, any bonuses, third-party providers, the whole lot goes into that sales and marketing budget. Brilliant.
Perfect. Yeah.
And in fact, as if James was a plant in the audience, he's actually nicely taken us into the first part of this slide, which is I'm calling this two different things, because especially those who are familiar with certain peer groups or business models, some will call it COGS, some will call it cost of sale. COGS is cost of goods sold, and the cost of sale, cost is cost of sale, of course. What's COG and what's an overhead? And again, if you refer to it as COGS, you probably refer to overheads as SG&A, sales, general and administration, i.e., anything that isn't directly a cost of sale. When I talked about having that staff plan as you're building the team out, because some of our staff are not going to be direct COGS, we want them to go into sales and marketing. So it's important to have different sections for each, so that you can see when you take on that lead generator or the salesperson, and when you take them on, and again, it's going to be affordable, and then you can model the impact they're going to have on the revenue and margin that's going to be generated. I've already talked about sanity checking capacity, and I've already talked about, ultimately, this gives you a budget as to what you can spend on acquiring new customers. Once we've got, and I'll whiz through this because I know we're short on time, once we've got our budget, what we can then do is build a forecast, but a forecast in terms of cash flow. When we look at a P&L, we're looking at the invoice date. We're not looking at the money received or the money paid out date. So you get an invoice for something dated the 1st of June, maybe it's on 30 days, June or 30 month. Yeah. So you'd be paying it the 1st of July, but the invoice goes into the month of June. If you imagine all of those different cash movement opportunities, that's what our cash flow forecast is going to do for us. For example, in the UK, we have VAT, sales tax, and typically what most businesses do is they'll pay that quarterly. So they'll be collecting VAT because hopefully they're selling more than they're buying. And so therefore their cash is going to tick up over a 3-month period, and then they're going to pay the VAT that they owe, and their cash is going to go down. Now, if you're not tracking and understanding that, and if what a lot of MSPs do that aren't financially supported and that are predominantly judging the health of their business on their bank balance, VAT alone will cause you huge amounts of anguish and uncertainty. I thought I was doing really well. I've taken on 10 new customers. I've been working really hard, and now my bank balance is lower than it was last. It's just because of VAT. I've used kind of tongue-in-cheek the cash flow for dummies image, but understanding as a business owner the difference between cash flow and P&L and where they link and how they drive each other is absolutely crucial to being able to operate and scale a business, because there'll be other things that then start to fold into this. For example, commission. To James's point, perhaps we're paying commission out at a later date, so therefore we want to budget for that. If we're going to get our new revenue here 3 months later, perhaps we're paying a commission payment. Maybe even 12 months later, we're paying a commission payment if we've got a sophisticated commission model for our salesperson, because we want them to stimulate them to get us good business that stays with us. So therefore, if they're rewarded in the long term, then they're more likely to be focused on getting a good customer in the short term. But basically, I won't linger too much on this. It is actually possible to build a forecast from your budget, and it doesn't have to be perfect in the first instance. But if you do just think about, oh yeah, when am I paying for these things? And then you create, again, you automate based on your cost of sales. I know I'm going to pay tech data next month, so I'm going to have 10 grand of sales here, and I'm going to pay 10 grand out plus the VAT the next month. And you'll see as your cost of sale goes up, as your revenue goes up, you'll be paying tech data more money and making sure that you've got the cash flow to support that. Once you're doing this though, Scott, what you're then going to do is think, what about if I collected the money before I had to pay tech data? Now, what about if I collected the money before I even placed the order with tech data? Even better. Now I've actually got more cash, surplus cash, that I can do other things with. And the more cash The simple answer is the cash is always better in your bank than someone else's. If you're then thinking about preserving and optimizing your cash flow, perhaps that then informs the terms that you trade with your customers on, and rather than defaulting to yeah, no problem, you can have a 30-day account. Actually, no, it's upfront, and yeah, what a difference that can make to your business. Pipeline, we probably don't have a huge amount of time for this. This is one that I'd love to get some thoughts from the audience on. It's often a contentious, spirited debate about where you track opportunities when they go from being a new customer to an existing customer, how you stimulate existing customer spend, i.e. through the technical account management process. But basically, I guess I've probably outlined what I think here is the general consensus, which is that if they're an existing customer, you manage their pipeline opportunities through opportunities in the PSA. If they're a new business, then you probably manage them in a different platform and you'll have different reporting. And at all times, what you're doing with your pipeline is you are qualifying them all the way through consistently. Are you still a prospect? Are you still interested? When are we going to speak next? What's going to happen next? Who else needs to be involved? And yeah, again, there's a whole other topic here, but can anyone tell me what ABC means? Always be closing. Oh, Kelly was just starting.
Yeah, you gotcha.
Okay, 10 points to Kelly. But yeah, that is where this comes together with we've got our budget. We are spending based on our budget. How are we going to know that the income is going to marry up with the budget? And if it's not, what adjustments do we need to make to the budget? I.e., do we need more people and bring forward our recruitment plans? Or if we're not selling as much as we targeted ourselves to, what costs can we avoid spending, delay, etc.? We now have our pipeline, we have our budget, we have our cash flow forecast, and they all need to be under constant review, monitoring, and management in order to give us information back to make decisions and take actions in the here and now, not 9 months after the year ends. What's the offer? Adam and I are very happy. Strangely, we enjoy looking at chart of accounts, and really the enjoyment comes from, did you realize this? If you just change that, then what a difference it could make. So basically what we're saying is you can book a 45-minute session with Adam or I, and I'm sure we'll have a link or something to do that, or you can visit our website. You can book a meeting directly from there. But basically, Adam and I would be very happy to spend a bit of time reviewing your chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is where the budgeting process can begin. So if you get your chart of accounts right, then you can then properly model what your ambitions are.
Excellent, Daniel. I'm going to put your contact link in the chat here. That's on your website. So I've got one final question for you, Daniel, and we can go to anyone else in the audience. You're just starting out as an MSP. What would the one bit of advice that you would give that people could take away with them?
Yeah, great question. I'm only allowed one. Okay, if you're in business, you're in sales.
Okay. Yep, there's just no business without sales, is there?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of running a business. You are first and foremost a salesperson. So everything you do at the beginning of your business has to be about that. And yeah, I think that would be if I'm only allowed one. No, so, yeah, if you gave me 10 or so, I could probably reel off another 9 things. But yeah, I'd say that.
This is coming from a former salesperson.
I'm going to be biased, right?
Yeah. I wonder how our technical audience feel about that advice. I think Jim's got somebody typing.
Yeah, this could be long. Oh no,
agree. There you go.
Good. Lovely. What's any sort of pinpoints that we've touched on that's been really informative or eye-opening from your side, Scott? And again, if anyone wants to put anything in the chat.
I think it's just like breaking it down into buckets and like just having that where your predicted monthly recurring revenue is, as opposed to what is hardware sales and project work that's coming in. Having it in those types of separate buckets really useful. Obviously doesn't apply to my business, but I can see how that would be really useful because it's otherwise it's previously it was almost like peaks and troughs with it. I do also want to know about your analogy of the growth spurt.
The growth spurts. Oh, yes. Okay. This is about the balance between being comfortable and having the energy and enthusiasm. And in fact, I'll do a shout out. One of the upcoming releases in our podcast series, ConnectWise, have a free resource on their site, and it's called Modes, and it basically describes different scenarios that a business owner is in, and it's possibly a more sophisticated version of my analogy. But my analogy is it's a lovely hot day. You're on a beautiful island in a bay, a cove. You're swimming across the said bay, and there's a nice rock, and it's been baking in the sun, and you're like, lovely. I'll just get out and sit on the rock for a bit. Yeah, this is quite nice, this rock. I'm nice and warm. I've now recovered from my swim. Hold on. There's another rock that's a bit bigger just over there, and I'd be able to stretch my legs out and I'd be a lot more comfortable as I'm a bit constrained on this rock. Hold on. I can also see that there are sharks in between here and there. So how badly do I want to be on that rock with my legs stretched out versus potentially just sitting here? I've still got my legs. I've not had an encounter with a shark. So basically, that's the ceiling that each and every MSP owner will have at some point. Do I really want to risk it or push on to the next level? Because
it's the sharks.
absolutely, and there's no answer to it. But the modes descriptor for ConnectWise is really good because it actually what it shows is you can be different owners at different times. If you've had a growth spurt, you've got yourself to a nice rock. You know what? It's okay to sit there for a bit, and maybe the sharks will swim off, and then you can swim across and get to the next one. And so that was the growth spurts analogy.
Love it. I can only imagine how you came up with that, Daniel. I'm wondering what's going through your head.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to say it's because I was probably I was in that situation, have been in that situation before, will be again, and always nice to think of a nice sunny day in a nice island somewhere.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Daniel, for your time. Thanks, everyone, for turning up to today's webinar. As I mentioned, we will be putting this recording out to everyone else that registered that never attended, but we'll probably put it onto YouTube as well and things like that. Daniel, I'll be in touch with links to it once it's up on the social medias and places like that.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, and really appreciate everyone's attention today, and look forward to doing some chart of account reviews in the coming weeks.
Excellent. Okay, take it easy, guys.
Cheers.
Speak to you later, Daniel. Bye.
Take care.